I can't tell you how many times I've had something rehearsed in my head, and then when it comes to it, my mind goes completely blank. And I think this happens to a lot of introverts. So why do we find it so hard to speak up and say what's really on our mind? Is it something that just happens to introverts? Or does this happen to everyone? And I think the worst part is that hours later, we then think back to what we wanted to say, and we know exactly what we should have said, but we just couldn't say it in the moment. I don't think it means we're bad at explaining ourselves. I just think that we struggle to match up to what's expected of people in this loud world. Maybe we do struggle to speak up, but I don't think it's something that we need to punish ourselves for. I'm going to tell you why it's not a flaw, and what can help if you are struggling. So you probably know the feeling if you can relate to wanting to say something in the moment, whether it's at work or with friends, with family, anywhere, in any situation. There's probably been something that you've wanted to say, but you just can't bring yourself to say it. And I think that's so normal. You probably criticize yourself and blame yourself for not speaking up. And you probably think to yourself, why didn't I say it? Sometimes we can't say what's on our mind. It's not about feeling guilty for not saying the things you want to say, because we're not people that speak up or are loud and outgoing. The number one reason why we struggle to speak up and say what's on our mind is because we process things. We think before we speak. And sometimes we think too much. And by doing this, we stop ourselves from actually saying what we want to say. We're overthinking. You might find that there are moments when you just naturally speak without thinking, and you're like, wow, I actually said that. And that's because you're not overthinking it. The difference with extroverts is that they talk while they think. So it feels like they always have something to say. They've always got that answer ready. Whereas we need to think about it. In conversation, it can feel like we need to keep up with the other person and have a quick response. Sometimes we just don't have that, so we end up saying nothing instead. It's like being told, right, say what's on your mind right now, but your brain is still trying to process your thoughts, so it's just like a head scramble. Another reason why introverts struggle to speak up and say what's on their mind is that we feel pressured. We feel pressured to constantly be speaking and talking. We don't want to ramble, and we don't want to be misunderstood, and we don't want to say something that we can't take back. So instead of speaking, we just wait. We don't say anything. And by the time we're ready, the conversation's already moved on, and someone else has said something, or it's just not the right time. So we're sort of left behind, and we're like, oh damn, I wish I could have said that. And we just didn't. To other people, it might look like we had nothing to say, but we were just thinking about it too much. We were worrying. One of the major reasons why we feel like we can't talk is because our brain shut down when we feel like we're put on the spot. I'm sure you can relate to this, and this has happened to me lots. Like when someone's asked me a question, or I feel like I'm suddenly put into an awkward situation, my brain just shuts down and I feel like I can't say anything. We struggle with questions that demand an instant response because we need time to think about them. So I think this is also why interviews are really daunting as well, because we're forced to respond to a question. Even if we've prepared for it, we're suddenly asked the question and our mind just goes blank. This is natural for introverts. It's natural for us to freeze and stumble over our words. I do it all the time, and I used to be really embarrassed about it, but now I just laugh it off. I'm like, that's just who I am. So I'm going to tell you why speak up is terrible advice. Because that's what everyone always says. Oh, speak up more, just say what's on your mind. For us introverts, it isn't easy. We can't just do it. It's not something that we can do with a flick of a switch or even a mindset shift. It's something we would have to learn. The truth is, we don't need to speak up. We just need to understand that we are more reflective than talkative, and that's not a bad thing. If you're struggling to speak up, know that it's okay to buy yourself time. You don't need to have an answer all the time. You don't need to force yourself to respond to things. And I know it's so easy to overthink your conversations after they've happened and like go back and think, oh, I wish I could have said this. But just know that the moment's passed and you can always say something in the future. There's always an opportunity that will come up where you can say what's really on your mind. If you feel like you are put on the spot, then simply say to the other person, look, I need time to think about that. Like, hold up for a second, let me think. You know, that's not going to cut off the conversation. That's going to give you a moment to think about what you want to say. Another good thing you can do is to prepare yourself for certain conversations, especially ones that are like repetitive. So if they're happening a lot, then you know that you can prepare yourself in some way. The most important thing is to stop judging yourself. You don't need to be the one constantly speaking. Truthfully, if you struggle with speaking, then just write things down, because that's what I find a lot easier. I will write things down. I always find like messaging someone or just getting my thoughts out with writing is just so much easier than speaking. So if you really have something to say, then write it down. Now remember, if you're an introvert that struggles to speak up, it's not because you're bad at communicating, or it's not because you lack confidence. At times you might, and that's okay. We're all human. But just remember that depth is what matters to you. You don't need to communicate like an extrovert. You don't need to compare yourself to other people or try and fit someone else's energy. Stay true to who you are. It's not about always having the right thing to say in the right moment. Sometimes there is no right moment. If you've got something on your mind right now, drop it in the comments, like let it all out, even if you can't say it to someone else. So thank you so much for watching, and always be your wonderful introverted self.